In the room, we have Eric Latif, Nduoko, C.T. Muga, and joining us on the line is Super Senator Johnson Sakaja. Good morning, Nairobi Senator Sakaja.
Morning, Eric. How's everyone?
Good morning.
We are very well, thank you.
Mko salama?
Kabisa.
You're keeping safe?
Given the circumstances, doing our best.
Very good.
I hope you guys are salama.
We're also doing the same.
Oh, excellent. That is good to hear.
Now, Senator, we are seeing reports appearing in the media this morning, the Pandemic Response and Management Bill 2020.
Yes.
That's a proposal of your committee. Tell us about this committee to start with.
Okay, I think as you might be aware, on was it the 1st of April, the Senate is sitting just to address this pandemic. Remember, Parliament had gone on a recess, so we had a special sitting on the 31st of March 2020. And so we resolved to establish an ad hoc committee to look at the COVID-19 situation and just to make sure we oversight actions by national and county governments in addressing the spread and effects. And so there's a whole list of TORs. You realize that many of the issues are cross-cutting, and so it couldn't go ordinarily to any of the departmental committees, say health committee. So on the 1st of April, I think, on the 1st of April, a meeting was held where they elected me chairman, but not as an April Fool's joke. They were serious about it. And Senator Kasanga, and we got to start our work. Given all of this social distancing, etc., we've had to innovate. And we've been holding virtual meetings online. We've done now 14 meetings, contrary to what your colleagues have been saying about Parliament to Toroka. Been working.
Actually, we ourselves have said it very loudly.
Yourselves as well. No, we've been working.
So you've been having meetings, online meetings?
Yeah. We've been having meetings on Zoom. We've been inviting stakeholders. We've been the first thing we did, we clustered the issues to 5 areas. One is the health issues. So that is community health, testing, quarantine, ICU facilities, HR for health, etc. And mental health, importantly. The second area was economic and finance issues. That is the macroeconomic effects of this thing, impact on business, trade facilitation, cushioning borrowers, etc. The third area was social, public order, and human rights. You realize when there's such a thing, many times the first casualty is human rights and the truth, protecting vulnerable people, women and girls at risk of domestic abuse, learners to continue studies, access to justice, the courts, etc.
Persons with disabilities.
Persons with disabilities, all these vulnerable people. And then the fourth issue was access to food, water, and basic commodities. So the continuous production and supply of food. You realize, like for instance, now with the lockdown, the supply of food is compromised in urban areas like Nairobi, where we don't farm much. And you see when they give a proposal saying you'll only bring food in a truck. They assume that food comes in a big green truck written food. Yet many of the ladies, the women who come to markets, use commuter transport to bring their cabbages and waru. So, that was an entire area. And how do we make sure vulnerable people can access food, subsidized etc. Then, of course, support services and cross-cutting issues. So we asked for public submissions. And, I'm really impressed. We got more than 146 submissions from institutions, individuals, organizations, very thorough submissions in all of these 5 thematic areas. The COG, Human Rights Commission, NGOs, the KMPDU, Pharmaceutical Association, everybody, you name it, Chamber of Commerce.
Landlords and tenants?
There's that Landlords and Tenants Association as well. Of course, for many of these as well, we cross-check with the Register of Societies to find out if
whether this does exist.
But either way, even an individual has the right to speak to Parliament. And so based on that, we have various interventions. one of which is the bill that you're talking about. That is just one of the interventions.
Okay.
Other interventions are administrative in nature. Others need an omnibus law that touches many different laws that already exist. So, Tunaendelea na kazi, we gave our second report yesterday. We've published the bill. And I must say this, Eric, such a situation really shows us, the beauty of the Kenyan people. Kenyans actually care and have ideas, and they came out in numbers. And so I really want to use your platform to just thank everyone who gave us submission. I'll send everyone an email saying thanks and what we've done with the submissions. But really, this is the time to pull together, to show leadership, for Parliament to play its role, and for us to continue with this work.
Good stuff. And very good stuff that you actually were working. You're among the few legislators who should only take a 50% pay cut. You can continue earning the other 50.
I had one saying yesterday he was not elected to go take pay cuts.
Okay. Really?
Ouch.
Oh my goodness! And this was on public TV. This was on national TV.
That's what I had on TV.
Okay.
Now let's come to this bill.
Yes.
Section 29, tenancy agreement, and then also 30, labor relations.
Yeah.
On the tenancy agreement, it says where a pandemic has affected the financial capacity of a tenant to meet their obligations. 1A, the tenant shall give a notice in writing to the landlord or contracting party that they are unable to meet their obligations because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
B, upon receipt of a notice under paragraph A, the contracting parties shall enter into an agreement on how the tenant shall meet their obligations at the end of the pandemic. And then 2 of that says the cabinet secretary in charge of housing will provide measures to cushion landlords and tenants. Let's discuss that first. What exactly are you saying?
Number one, what we're saying is that for the biggest section of our society, the largest expenditure really is rent.
Yep.
And you see, many times we even assume that the people who need to be cushioned are just those maybe in informal settlements in Kibera, in Mathare, and in the slums. Yet we have this huge, I don't know what we call ourselves, because I think I'm maybe one of them, fictitious middle class.
Yes.
Where if we don't get a salary for 2-3 months,
we are done.
We're out. We're done completely.
Yes.
So in the case of a pandemic, and there was a lot of pressure, people saying, let rent be waived. Of course, you can't do that. That will just be populist.
Yep.
But in contracts, many contracts have a force majeure clause.
Yeah.
That says when there's something, an act of God or a pandemic or an epidemic, some of those clauses are not applicable, and you can negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're just saying is that we're giving leeway for an agreement between the tenant and the landlord to say, okay, you may not be able to pay now. How do you restructure this? Are you able to pay? And also in the act, we're talking about for those landlords who have mortgages, the banks also within that period should be able to restructure. And we have different other laws that can support this. So it's really just trying to cushion both sides, not just the tenants, and not saying don't pay. You will have to pay still, but you have to get into that agreement. Possibly in the regulations under 29.2, that agreement can be deposited with the rent tribunal or something. Yeah. And you get into an agreement, because in a pandemic, someone will have to kaza mshipi. So it might be unfair on one side, on the other a bit, but it's a pandemic. So you don't just have arbitrary, everyone getting evicted. True. As it is, things are tough. So yeah, to some quarters it might sound populist, but I think it's a balance between both sides of it. We've had the president appealing, to landlords, just asking for, please try and relax these things for now. So what we're doing, we're just giving an opportunity for the tenant and the landlord to enter into an agreement.
What do we need a law for this?
The problem sometimes when common sense doesn't prevail in society, then you need a law to make people be good,
Right.
Ideally, you shouldn't need a law. Any reasonable landlord and any reasonable tenant as well. You don't say, it's a pandemic. If you don't have this, people can also take advantage.
True.
So it's really just to bring some order for both parties. And we've given the cabinet secretary for housing, a chance to now to prescribe regulations that can actually protect both landlords and now in further detail to protect landlords and tenants. Yeah.
But now looking at the specific language here, it says that if a tenant is unable, they can write to their landlord.
Yes.
And then the landlord shall enter into an agreement.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you were very deliberate when you use the word shall, because it says they are obligated then to have this conversation.
I think they need to be obligated to have the conversation. As it is, there are laws that govern tenancy agreements and contracting between landlords and tenants. It is not just arbitrary, but you can stay in my place without an agreement. And many of these agreements are actually even of a verbal nature in different parts of society.
Yeah.
But this is giving that obligation that you guys must sit and agree. It's a pandemic. The effects on financial capacity of the tenant. The financial capacity of the tenant will also affect the financial capacity of the landlord.
True.
Because some of these landlords, you'll just find it someone who has 3 rooms in, Kayole or Pipeline. But, they also need those resources. So we're just saying you guys must find a way to agree. And within those regulations, what we are foreseeing is that they should be then able to deposit it, of course, in a strengthened form of the land dispute. I mean the rent dispute tribunal, or whether it's the local OCS or the chief, whatever the case. So just try to govern that relationship a bit more, only during the time of a pandemic.
All right.
And remember, this law we have also prescribed when a pandemic is announced, and when a pandemic the end is also announced
as well.
Declared, because you also don't want someone to say, okay, Sasa, since Corona is like this, we're never paying rent again.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we've seen that happening in some places, as encouraged by politicians.
Of course. Now, the second part of it says that the housing CS may provide measures to cushion landlords. It appears like you're saying the government does not have to do something.
Well, I think on that one, and the good thing, Eric, with what we're doing even with you, is that at this stage, this is the first draft of the bill was hot off the press yesterday.
Yes.
So this is public participation. If we say, look, let us make it a definitive obligation, then we say shall. So I think that really needs to be a direct obligation on the CS.
Senator, as we look forward, and let's say that this is rolling now and it's in practice, do you think there's a structure that is solid enough in place to make sure that you're dealing with any kind of disputes that might come as a result of this? If we're foreseeing that there could be quite a number of people who would come forward and say, look, I'm unable to agree with my landlord, or I'm unable to agree with my tenant, is the structure solid enough in place to take any complaints that would come through?
Not yet, unfortunately. The structure, when you talk about the rent appeals tribunal, right now, they need some more capacity. Because you find, one, the limitation on the amount is low. We need to amend that. Because it talks about 2,500. We need to take it to 150,000 at least, rent, that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Number 2, you might have a case in Meru, and you're told the chairman of the tribunal, because it's the chairman who listens to these disputes, is in Kakamega. Go to Kakamega. So the first thing we're saying is that let's devolve this tribunal to counties, and then let's also empower advocates in counties to be, arbitrators.
Right.
Use community leaders. You have chiefs in the villages. You have Nyumba Kumi. So let's make it a bit more flexible so that they have that capacity.
Employ dispute resolution mechanisms.
Exactly. So arbitration and dispute resolution mechanisms need to be employed. So that is a gap that currently exists. But you see, this law, even if you look at how we've called it, the title is the Pandemic Response and Management Bill. We do want to call it a coronavirus bill.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with corona now. Hopefully we'll be done soon. We are praying. But what happens next year or tomorrow
could be something else.
So really we're trying to legislate for posterity. And so even as we do this, then we are alive to the other gaps that may exist within legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There's this other bit now, the section that talks about labor relations.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
This one, you are saying, so 31, where a pandemic adversely affects the ability of an employer to pay salaries or wages, A,
Yes.
notwithstanding provisions of the Employment Act, an employer shall not terminate a contract of service or dismiss an employee.
Yes.
And B, an employer shall not coerce an employee to take a salary cut.
Yes.
And number 2, you're saying, despite what you've just described above, an employer is unable, where an employer is unable to meet his obligation to pay salaries or wages, the employer shall permit an employee to take leave of absence without pay for the duration of the pandemic.
You see, I also know how this one sounds, and I know why you went to 29 and 30. During a pandemic, of course, the different vagaries of the economy. Even before a pandemic, we saw KQ sending people on unpaid leave.
Yes.
But they didn't terminate their employment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're saying, if it's because of a pandemic that you're not able to sustain this staff that you have, one, don't force them to take a cut.
Mm-hmm.
Don't terminate it, but you can send them on unpaid leave, and such that when you improve, and we hope now you'll be able to bounce back, then you bring them back. And that's what we're saying. We need measures. If you look at 3, the CS Labour and Parliament can develop measures to cushion employees and employers, especially employers. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can have government-backed credit guarantees. That now the employer says, because of this pandemic, I need to access certain support for my business. And so you have a government-backed security. You go and you get some assistance, and those are the other laws that we want to amend. But the issue of mass job losses, and then when you bounce back, then you look for other people, actually goes against the Labour Relations Act as it stands today.
Yeah, it's a dicey one. This one.
It's dicey, but I think.
Are you saying that the Labour Relations Act considers in detail the outcomes of a pandemic and perhaps what needs to be considered?
No. The Labour Relations Act doesn't talk about pandemics, but it says what needs to be considered when it comes to relieving someone of their work. So you just can't
terminate somebody.
Just terminate somebody just like that, or force somebody to take a pay cut. Even the Constitution itself says that, and this is especially for public officers, that you cannot review downwards the remuneration of a public officer. So the same should be there in the private sector.
But is it in the case of a pandemic, or is it just when things are normal? Yes.
This is force majeure.
So Labour Relations Act says when things are normal, you don't just fire someone. So we're saying here, even in the situation of a pandemic, don't just fire someone. Try and send them on unpaid leave. But within the regulations, I will provide for how do you look for some business relief, for instance, from government. If you look at legislation, in fact, what we've been able to do before we came up with this, we've analyzed what 20 other jurisdictions have done across the world. 20 other countries, what their parliaments have done. If you look, for instance, at what they call the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act in the States, it is extremely thorough in the manner of business support that can be given. Now, of course, we have not reached their level.
So it's prescriptive.
It's very prescriptive.
The Act says what the government shall do.
Oh, it talks about entrepreneurial development.
Right.
It talks about what the government shall do. How can you apply for that kind of business relief? Where do you access it from? Grant determination, how it is done. They have a style of legislation that is extremely. It's not like our Westminster style. Theirs is extremely detailed there. But for us, we leave more to regulations.
But Senator, is it really the legislation, or is it the willingness of the citizenry to actually abide by the legislation?
Well, you see, for us, what we do is to legislate first. And then we must encourage the citizens.
Then goodwill comes in second.
We can't say, since people are unwilling, let me as a legislator stop legislating. I still have to legislate. I have to provide, because, even with Corona, as Senator of Nairobi, I'm not a doctor. I can't go to hospital. All I can do is oversight, represent, and legislate, and make sure that I've done my part.
Yeah.
Now, those who enforce the law, the executive, needs to do their part in making sure laws are implemented. And society, people like you guys who educate Kenyans, need to encourage them to follow the law. So let's all do our part.
So let's come back into this particular one. So first of all, the proposal here is that an employer should not coerce or give anybody a pay cut.
Because of the pandemic.
Because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Or even terminate services because of a pandemic.
Yes.
And also it says it's easier for you to send somebody on unpaid leave.
Yeah, leave of absence without pay for that duration.
For that duration.
But because as you said, this is almost even a force majeure element of that contract.
Yeah.
But that person's right to employment is still guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you close down a hotel and there are no customers coming in, there's no cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
There's no income.
It's hard for you to pay them, of course.
There's no income. It's impossible for the employer to pay them.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that then you render the person jobless. And so within those regulations, and I think within this time, because we have a 6-month mandate as this committee,
Yeah.
we'll also go down to the details of now how do we access. Imagine, we have said we have a 20 billion fund, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which might even go up, that we are proposing to be set up.
Mm-hmm.
And it is accessible to banks, and it's it's government backed, such that different institutions, and banks have a way of saying, okay, this is what your cash flows have been. Yes, we can see that it has gone down because of this pandemic. Yes, we will advance you this amount of money for you to be able to sustain your workforce and your business.
Mm-hmm.
That is how we cushion businesses and how we cushion employers and employees.
Mm-hmm. But so the other part of this particular clause talks about the government now coming up with measures that will cushion employers and employees. It does not become prescriptive.
Again, they will say shall.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's shall. Yes.
Yeah, and you see, when he says with the approval of Parliament, normally we talk about subsidiary legislation. That is then regulations, because our they call it Commonwealth. Westminster sounds very Borisish. Our Commonwealth style is not letting acts of Parliament or statutes be too prescriptive, but the details come in regulations.
But doesn't that just open it up to all manner of interpretations?
No. Now, when you have the regulations
now become prescriptive.
They're very prescriptive, and they must come to Parliament.
Okay.
To the delegated legislation committee.
So this all happens, and this is put into enforcement, Senator, and then you have people who may have already lost their jobs, for example, before this bill comes into play, and then it does. What happens to them?
And that's why we're talking about safety schemes, social safety schemes in Section 31, to support vulnerable people, informal sector workers, vulnerable households, anyone who's been disrupted by the pandemic. We're talking about cash transfers. Incidentally, and many people I don't know if I should be saying this on radio, government has a lot of information based on all these things we've been doing, Udumba, census, whatnot.
Census.
That if the executive decides to actually send 5Gs to every vulnerable household, they can do it at the touch of a button.
That's true.
And so it is up to us now as your representatives, because I think that's the reason you voted for me. I'm sure you did. To now push the government to actually help these vulnerable people. I can tell you in Nairobi, so many people cannot access food. The kind of messages we are getting.
Yeah.
And there's the assumption that, maybe when there's a lockdown, let's do it. Already it is dire in many parts of the city. We have an entire night economy, Eric. We know many musicians or our friends, DJs, bouncers, waiters, Uber drivers, who cannot sustain themselves as we speak today.
Yeah, because they have basically lost their jobs. They have no income.
Of course, they've lost it. There's no bouncer bouncing now during the day or at night. There's no DJ. They're doing live shows for free on Instagram.
Waiters and waitresses are not working.
Waiters, waitresses, because everywhere is just now takeaway.
True.
Take out, So there is actually need for social safety nets for these people. And we need to realize that the vulnerable are no longer geographically compact. They're not just in Kibera. They're in Kileleshwa.
Yeah.
They're in Eldoret.
Yep.
They're in Kilimani. They're in South Sea. You know, they're not just in Mukuru. A huge percentage of your listeners right now, Eric,
Are in distress.
They're in distress. They don't know what to do. They don't know where they'll feed their families next week. Schools are asking for school fees. Some of the schools.
Yes.
And I've seen in many groups, even some groups I'm on, I won't say the school. Parents are saying, for what?
Absolutely.
True.
Parents are asking what's going to happen to what they paid last month that was not utilized.
Exactly. But also remember, the teachers still need salaries. So there's a balance. And that's where we need to look, and that's what we are proposing. And I've spoken to colleagues in the National Assembly. We need to realign our budgets. We are extremely exposed as a country. The macroeconomic effects of this, if you look at the World Bank report, are gonna be tough.
Yes.
It's gonna be tough times. So some of these big projects, unfortunately, we might have to put on hold.
True.
Put a lot more on just cushioning, on safety nets. I'm glad after fuel has gone down.
Has it?
And I
thought it was announced that it has gone down. Has it actually gone down?
It does go. It goes down immediately at midnight. 18 bob cheaper.
Normally they say the stock, but I think some stations have reflected it.
Yep.
Yeah, I've not had a chance to see it, but
this one is usually not in negotiation of there's your stock finishing.
Yeah.
At midnight it changes.
Actually, ERC implement. You're right. Actually,
Yep.
ERC normally they implement that immediately, and that is good because the cost of fuel affects food and inflation and everything.
Yes.
So I think the stance we must all take as a country at this point is and yesterday in my submission in the Senate, because I was telling the executives that they shouldn't play cat and mouse hiding from oversight. We are not antagonistic as Parliament. We are trying to support what the executive is doing.
In fact, you're too supportive from where some of us sit.
We need to be, but of course, with keen eyes.
Yeah.
Just to make sure this is a time a country comes together. This is a time we say, okay, yes, I was earning an extra maybe 2 million out of my rental. Relaxing it to a name is not too bad.
True.
If I'm a landlord, for instance,
True. Yep.
I might have to fight these guys, but if I agree with them, something, it just calls for humanity. This is a time for humanity. And so this law and the other interventions I'm bringing another report next Tuesday. Really will need a lot of goodwill from the people, a lot of goodwill from, in fact, even from the National Assembly, because this is initially a Senate initiative. We had asked them to also set up another committee, which I'm sure they will do. That's what we can work together. So for now, let's forget those fights of upper house, lower house. Let's forget which party you're in. Let's forget what question we asked you last time when you came to Bunge. For now, let's be pragmatic and see what is best for the people of Kenya.
Right. I know that we're currently talking about the bill and we're looking at stimulus and, trying to cushion because of what's happening here. I have to ask, though, doesn't this also present an opportunity to look into the future about work that actually should be done, Senator, about what needs to be put in place? Because look at other countries, and the truth is that they didn't struggle when it came to making sure that their people were cushioned. It was a let's go, let's do it, let's get it done now. It can be done because it was number one, already considered. Number two, it was already enshrined in law. Isn't it time to look at then what needs to be done in terms of buckling down and get some things done for the future, regardless of what that would be?
I agree with you 100%. Unfortunately, this is not a time for me to point fingers, but last year, early 2019, Senator Mutula Kilonzo and I co-sponsored a bill on national disaster management and how it cascades to the counties and preparedness. And it's been stuck in the National Assembly since, If this was done, there would probably be no need even for this intervention.
For this particular
at this point. Number two, some of the representations we've received from governors, for instance, we've been given, last year we gave 316 billion to governors. In Nairobi, I made sure Nairobi has around 16 billion. Yeah. And other counties got amounts based on all those factors. When a governor is saying they need money to buy chemicals to fumigate, when a governor says they don't know the cost of an ICU bed, it shows that there's been something fundamentally wrong
Yeah.
on this devolved function called health.
Yep.
Or something fundamentally wrong with that individual.
Especially.
Yes.
Especially with that individual. And so our underbelly is clearly soft. And we just thank God that so far these cases have not escalated. At least in the last 2 or so or 3 weeks, there's been some good response by government, by national government. You can see, they've gotten, PPEs now coming in. You can see we're upgrading a lot of hospitals. Yeah. But like we were caught, I must say we were caught flat-footed as a country. We need to be better prepared. In fact, as Senate, we are considering, since we're doing the division of revenue bill, a conditional grant to make sure every county gets 10 extra ICU beds direct. We're not giving them the money to go buy them. It's going to be a direct. That money can only be used for ICU facilities,
Yeah.
Such that in the next 3 or 4 months, we have another 470 ICU beds across our county. And so it's a bad opportunity, but it's an opportunity for us to right those wrongs, but also for the electorate to remember what their leaders have been doing in the different spheres. So it's exposed us a bit. It's exposed.
Not a bit. It has exposed us heavily.
He's used the phrase he's using is correct. Where in the English language you say a bit, it means it's a lot.
Yes, it's been a minute.
It's been a minute. Yes, the senator is right. It's exposed us a bit. Carry on, please.
It's really exposed us, but I'm saying a bit because I thank God. If we had 1,000 cases today, we'd be in trouble, or maybe last week. Yeah. Maybe today we can handle a bit more. But if we did that in the last 2 weeks, if we got just a huge surge of these cases, we'd be in trouble. Remember, the ICU beds are not waiting for corona patients. The other patients with also other
needed it a while ago.
That have been there. And so in as much as, by the way, we've made some good strides in other aspects. If you look at kidney issues of dialysis, we've actually made a lot of progress since the medical equipment service scheme started. I was guest of honor at the World Kidney Day, and the doctors were saying, we rarely congratulate government, but we'd have lost by now another 4,000 people.
Wow!
That are not able to get this service. So yes, we must say yes, some good has been done, but I think we can do better as a people. The Kenyan people normally perform better than the leaders. I don't know why, and then you keep choosing us. But as a people, we
deserve better.
But Senator, I would look at this situation we're in as yet another opportunity for anything that may have gone wrong. This is a period of redemption. Things can be righted, wrongs can be put right, and many things that we had previously not done could get done.
That is true.
And even the terrible image and the loss of confidence that we say the citizenry have on our leadership, that also can be remedied. But it must be taken seriously because floods are with us, locusts are with us, even at the same time as the coronavirus is with us.
I think number one, the image and the disaffection. There's a public disaffection towards the elected leaders. That is natural. I don't think that changes. And I'll give you an example. Your sister newspaper did a story calling us traitors on Monday.
Yes.
Yet some of the guys who did that story have been attending my committee and they're private to what we've been doing, saying we've done nothing. So there's also a level of dishonesty sometimes that shows that it actually sells and it's fashionable to bash leadership. Yes, we have failed in many respects, but also
Senator, when you highlight an issue, do you highlight the exceptions or do you highlight the rule?
Normally we highlight the rule, but the exceptions are what are newsworthy.
They're worth a mention somewhere. You've got like a footnote.
Something.
But this is why we are talking to you, because we want the exceptions to actually tell us what is also happening. Yeah. The others are also given a chance, and sometimes they do not respond.
No. And I'm really grateful, and I agree. And let it be not lost to us. Yeah, let it not get lost. That yes, this is an opportunity to remedy a lot of the issues that have not been going right. And I pledge to the people of Nairobi who are listening that I will continue to do my part as your senator, and I pledge that the Senate, because for now I'm leading the initiative in the Senate, we will do our part. So please don't lose faith in us completely. Just pull out the weeds of skepticism. Believe in us a little.
We need to whip you a bit. That's what we ought to do.
You ought to be vigilant, but not dismissive.
All right. So let's end on this conversation on this one point.
Yeah.
The issue of pay cuts. Yes. So everybody else, as you know, everybody else is taking some reduced income.
Yeah.
Your leadership in the Senate and the National Assembly have also taken some voluntary pay cuts.
The speakers.
The speakers, right?
Yeah.
Not the leaders yet. So, do you think it's about time that all other members of Parliament take a pay cut, and actually not just members of Parliament, and across other cadres of government as well?
No. Let me answer it this way. There's the popular answer, the populist one, to say yes, take everything. And people will clap. The first question we must ask, we're talking about a certain amount of money that is required. Yeah?
Yes.
What is the impact of individuals who also, within their incomes, have, commitments? I know many members, and honestly, when Senator Mukomen said it, he said it's not a lie. I know many members whose pay slips may be reading 10,000-20,000 shillings. They have committed a lot of their resources. The impact of that in compared to the real needs that we have. Number two, it is true that the burden of the wage bill is extremely high. If you look at how many Kenyans work for the public service, less than 1 million. Actually, possibly less than 600,000. Yet, more than 40% or 50% of our revenue
goes to paying salaries.
Overhead.
So what we need is not just a political knee-jerk reaction of even me have dedicated my entire salary. Because in essence, without announcing it, if you look at for instance, for my case, if you look at the instance of the causes I support, the people I'm supporting, it's really as if I've taken the cut. But instead of looking at it in terms of populist individual moves, how do we reconfigure that wage discussion to make sure that we're not burdening you, Latif, and CT and Do, that for every soda you're buying, out of that VAT, half of it is going to pay me. I think that's the more sustainable discussion we need to have. It is true we need to look at the issue of public wage remuneration. As a whole.
Yes.
But let us not fall into the trap of just trying to be populist, to look good, say that, I have given away my entire salary. And in essence, you have not. Many of the people who are announcing that, and I will not name names, they just say it, but they're not treated.
It's just for what? And that's why I'm saying this should not be a voluntary thing. The same thing that we're talking about. Employers are sending letters to their employees, telling their employees, due to these harsh times, this is what we are doing.
And it's not a discussion.
It's not a discussion. The same thing should not be that you, Senator Sakaja, because you're feeling sufficiently philanthropic, you therefore say that I'm going to take a 20% or 80% or 40% pay cut. It should come. This is an opportunity, just like you said earlier. This is an opportunity for us to right very many wrongs. Is it also not an opportunity for us to review as well and say, okay, so how much are we paying people? What is it that we can do? And start, because you're asking whether it would have an impact. I believe it would have a huge impact. Whatever amount of money that we can salvage now could have an impact.
I agree in terms of when you look at fiscal consolidation in its entirety, we need to review our recurrent and our development. We need to review all that. We need to review how much we pay everybody in public service. That one I agree. Yeah? But I will not go and tell a member, now you have to cut your salary by this percentage. One, even if I want to, Eric, I don't pay myself. There's an institution that has that role.
Yes.
So it is SRC. This discussion should not be on a voluntary basis, that some MPs are taking pay cuts, others are not taking pay cuts.
It shouldn't be.
Because they decide instead to
it should be an SRC conversation.
It needs to be a conversation, of course, based on a constitution that will take effect with the new, either the new dispensation, or we can choose to even forget that provision of the law and say, okay, from now on, let's tujipange with authority, because it's tough times. let's pull up our socks. And I am ready personally to do it, but I'm saying that is not the answer. The answer is to review the entire public sector wage burden on the public, and not just that. To also review why do we have to have a budget of 3 trillion? I keep asking. We don't need a 3 trillion budget in this country. We're trying to do everything at the same time. It doesn't work because what it does, it puts so much pressure on government because of the deficit to then go to the domestic market to borrow. And so, Eric, on your side hustle or my biashara or anybody's biashara, you cannot get money from the private sector. And so the economy is not growing. President Mwai Kibaki is loaded with running a brilliant economy and doing a lot of things. His budget never hit 1.5 trillion, you know?
Yep.
So instead of doing 1,000 big projects, just do a few meaningful ones, but make sure the common person has money in their pocket. And that is by ensuring there's cash flow, there are no pending bills, you're paying people, and your budget is well balanced. So me, I look at the real, most sustainable answers, not just that which might be popular and my listeners say, hey, Super Senator has taken a pay cut. No. That is not the answer to that is not the real solution.
But for now,
in my humble opinion, and I put it wrong.
That would not be the long-term answer, but now when it's
now,
at crunch time, something needs to be done.
Actually, we applaud the Senate for the 200 million that they removed from one of their budgets. That is a structural solution and it's a good one. But you see, we haven't heard Parliament coming up with any such suggestion, or maybe they've come up with
Assembly.
it. National Assembly, and maybe I haven't read it, but have they really?
They haven't yet. I had a suggestion of, I think, trying to come up with $1 billion from part of this budget. And let me give you an example. This 200 million was possibly not even essential, you know?
Yeah.
It was probably in a budget line that was not a must. You know, I've always said, guys, you don't have to, you know, you saw some MCs going to see where Jesus was born in his time. or people were saying, we're going to see how Facebook works. I mean, but you see, that 200 million is a significant amount. That's what I'm saying. If you tell every member, for instance, if you tell me to cut $500,000, and we're 67 of us, if we all take a cut of $500,000 in the Senate, that is 33 million, 33.5.
Yes.
Without going to a pay cut, 200 million has been found.
Yeah, just like that.
That was not essential.
You know, Senator, if the discussion is as you're presenting it, no one will even talk about the pay cut. It's the response we've had from leaders of your ilk regarding this pay cut. It's the way they've responded and the disdain with which they've responded that has actually elicited the debate that we're having. How dare you talk about responsibility as though they're the only people in this country who have responsibility?
It's about being completely tone deaf. Everybody, just like you can pass on the message to Senator Murkomen. Everybody who has a salary has some commitment.
Everyone who doesn't have a salary has commitment.
Everybody who does not have a salary has some commitment. People have loans, all right? The same way we are being urged to go and have conversations with our banks. Yeah. It's the same way we urge our leaders to go and have conversations with their banks or whoever they owe money to.
And you know what? Maybe you guys, because your show runs from, is it 7 to 10?
6.
6
to 10.
Yes.
So from 10 kwenda mbele, you guys should have a side hustle to come do PR and media management to Wabunge.
I think it might be necessary. Because you know what? Just like you said now, you talked about 200 million shillings having been found without a pay cut even being mentioned, right? Yeah. So that means that there are other avenues to get this.
Some
thought process went into
it.
Somebody said, oh, listen, folks, there's some money here that, you know, if we really looked at it, it was not necessary for us to have this particular project in place, right?
We can still operate without
and we can operate without it. But like CT said, Senator, it is clear that the attitude that comes from it is like, even if I were to get a pay cut, how far is it really going to go? Without taking into consideration that there's somebody who relies on a very little bit to get through the day. And so it makes a huge difference to them.
I completely agree with you. And I really feel that what we need to be doing right now, and I had that discussion even last evening with the chairman of the budget committee, let us reopen the financial year's budget and remove everything that is not essential. And you will make much more meaningful savings than arbitrary pay cuts. Let us also review and say this public wage burden cannot be at the percentage it is.
Yes.
So to have a review, you see the last time the problem of what they did, the review was not based on anything empirical. It was not a study. They just said we want to save X amount, divided by every member.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything. In fact, even at that point, it looked like.
And what was the response of our elected leaders? Get rid of the head of this particular agency.
Serema and China.
So now, you see now what's going on in China. But you see, maybe because you went with a bad news. But the point is, it looked like one arm of government was just being targeted because it's always a soft, it's an easy target. Yet wages in the other arms were going up. So what I'm saying, we need to have an objective discussion on the entire budget and say, look, the public wage bill is this amount. This is where ideally it should be based on best practice. Number two, you're spending maybe even you'll find billions, tens of billions on things that are not essential.
Yeah.
Cut that out. This is the time to do it. There's no other time that we can do it.
We will
and
never
so,
get
and
this
so that discussion must keep pushing. Yeah.
And also, but Senator, there's something that I believe your fellow senators and members of parliament need to understand. They are not our lords and saviors, they are servants. And they should stop talking to us from this lofty perspective and view that we are people who should be talked down to. They must understand what their mandate is. And so long as there's this disconnect, they will have serious problems.
No, for me, I completely agree with that. And I don't know what happens sometimes when these positions, maybe, I don't know, go to your head. Leadership is a privilege, number one. And it's service. It's so that now you elect me as your senator, and now I'm suddenly the biggest honcho. I have a motorcade with an ambulance.
Right.
I have, and there are no ambulances. If you look at some of the motorcades some leaders have, including many governors, you wonder if the guy is actually fit to be in office. The guy should be in hospital. If you're moving around with an ambulance, and it is this king mentality that has been created that when mkubwa, you need 3 drivers, you need someone to open your door, and the day you choose to drive, it is a story. You have to put it online.
It's a story.
Calm down. I tell people to calm down.
Take it easy.
Take it easy. These things come and go. Power is transient.
Kabisa. Senator Johnson Sakaja, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning.
Thanks so much for your time, guys.
Thanks so much.
No, thank you very much, Senator.
Yeah, and stay safe.
You too,
Social
please.
distance. What you have.
You too, and tell your colleagues not to host parties.
Don't get around.
Yeah. Asante sana.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? Spice FM.